Hello, world singers. My name is Tyler.
And my name is Brooke.
And this is Cosmere Conversations.
Welcome back to another timeline episode. We, in lieu of doing a full reread series on the podcast, are going character by character, following characters from the Stormlight Archive all the way through all 4 books to give us a really complete picture of where they're at when we're going to pick up with them for Wind and Truth. I don't know about you, but I've already found this series to be really helpful.
Yes, we have certainly heard from the fans that you really liked the Kaladin chronologically, and I'm going to be honest, that's the most boring one.
Yeah.
That's the one that we basically get chronologically from Way of Kings onwards. There are flashbacks, but they are nowhere near as complex as the next 2 characters we're going to look at today. Is going to be Shallan Davar.
Now, if you're thinking, wait, Cosmere Conversations, didn't you already do a timeline of Shallan Davar episode? And the answer is yes. Shallan's character and story arc is so complicated that we have needed to do multiple episodes. Our original episode 81, titled The Timeline of Shallan Davar, is really specifically looking at her Knight Radiant story. When exactly did she become a Knight Radiant? When she is using Testament versus Pattern? All of those really, really specific details in the text. So we're not going to go over those specific details today. I highly recommend that you check out that past episode before Wind and Truth. And then another one that you might be interested in is our episode 101, Who is Shallan's Mom? Which talks through a really big theory in the fandom and all of the evidence for who Shallan's mom might be.
So this is really a trilogy now. The thrice minimum personaed Shallan has been broken down into a triumvirate of different episodes when we're trying to decipher this character. We're going to do the chronological overview today and hope that in conjunction with these other 2 episodes, episode 81 and 101, it makes a really good collective understanding of Shallan, because we need this deep dive into Shallan Davar. And so let's start us off where I always do, which is the end. Which is actually the first of the final 10 days. The beginning of Stormlight Archive 5 happens in the year 1175 in the 5th month on the first day of the first week. And then we go back to 1156 in the 5th month on the first day of the first week, the same day that the first of the final 10 days begin, but 19 years before the birthday of Shallan Davar. She is born exactly 19 years before the first of the final 10 days.
That's very interesting.
Yep.
Okay. I like it. Shallan bonds her first spren, Testament, at around 1165, age 9-ish. So fairly young. We still don't really know what exactly happened to lead to this first bond. Of course, this first bond is a problem in Shallan's home, as Shallan's mother is associated with the Skybreakers, who are trying to kill Surgebinders, and therefore she tries to kill her daughter.
Shallan's mother is going to be the victim of the shard blade that we know as Testament, but that entire gap from first bonding to the death of Shallan's mother is just over 2 years. So she has a very long time, certainly longer than we have seen her with Pattern, to bond and grow with Testament. We believe because that blade is used and we associate the free summoning of blades with the third ideal, even though Lightweavers are a little weird, we think she's a third ideal Night Radiant at this time after 2 years with Testament.
Yeah, at about 11 and a half, she is a third ideal Radiant. This is really the only in-text information we have about Shallan's mom, but there has been just absolutely rampant speculation. We just talked about this a little bit last week with Shandel Green and how this particular theory has been fully and wholeheartedly adopted by a large part of the fandom. So go listen to that episode, Who is Shallan's Mom, and let us know what you think. During this incident, Shallan's father tries to protect Shallan and basically is unsuccessful, which leads Shallan to need to be aggressive with her Shardblade. However, her father does cover for her after that event, saying that he's the one who killed his wife and it's because she was with a lover. And so he's got this whole cover story, and this is kind of the beginning of the end of Shallan's family.
Yeah, and we are still continually learning about the early days of Shallan. I would not be surprised if we got further backstory into the Testament and Shallan relationship, because you are saying it's the beginning of the end as we understand it.
Yeah.
This is the beginning of the end. This kind of pact made for good motivations. Lynn Davar kind of sacrificing for his daughter in a way of taking the blame, taking the negative association, taking the hatred of his family, his staff, the fear, all of those things. He does not react well to those pressures,
No.
but he, at the core, is trying to protect this young girl, but we don't know what actually triggered what we assume is some trauma or some breaking in Shallan that happened earlier. So the beginning might have actually begun far before Testament was ever
Right.
around in the picture, but this moment is huge, and very clearly these are the dominoes that we see play out. It is Helloran, the eldest brother, who is going to maybe be most angered by this situation, this belief that Lynn, his father, had killed his mother in rage over a jealous lover spat. That's going to push him away, and he's going to abandon the family. The abandonment of Helloran and the dissolution of the Davar family hurts each of the Davar children. Balat becoming more psychopathic, taking pleasure in the hurting and eventual killing of small animals. And at the same time, he's going to withdraw from conflict within the family and kind of like channel his anger and his mental difficulties with this processing into the harming of creatures outside of the immediate family.
The next brother is Jushu, and he is a gambler. He at one point is almost taken by his creditors, I guess, and we don't really know if he's going to be tortured or killed or sold into slavery, but it's probably one of those three things, maybe all of the above, because he can't pay his debts back. And there is a moment where Shallan buys back his freedom with some gifts that her father had given them, and she convinces the slavers to release Jushu, even though the items that she has are not the value that they are really owed.
It is an important moment for Shallan as she rescues and gets to act the hero in this moment. She will continue to try to be that person, to be that hero for her other brothers. We see these kind of like series of flashbacks play out over her young childhood, and we certainly know where this is going, but she does have this kind of like sequence of improving moments when she is helping and assisting, and it begins with the rescuing of Jushu.
The next brother, Wickham, is a really quiet and introverted young man. He could become an ardent, but their father does not want that future for one of his sons. Shallan encourages him to study and engage in some of those activities that are kind of more associated with the Ardents, because she thinks that it will help him have hope and feel a little bit better in their terrible family situation.
Yeah, Shallan's kind of playing up a little bit of the sad clown during this time. She is trying to bring joy to others around, where she herself is definitely exhibiting all of the problematic symptoms we're going to see in her later character develop into much bigger problems. But she is still having moments of zoning out, or whatever phrase we want to use, losing time and not having a full grip of her consciousness. She's becoming kind of catatonic in these moments and is slipping through moments of her life only to reawaken later. We know that this is a type of defense mechanism she will use throughout her entire life when she's dealing with problematic memories. And while we can assume so many of those are related to the killing of her mother, the abandonment of the bond with Testament, we also should think that there are traumas earlier than those things that she is still processing that would have happened when she was, 5 to 10 years old, something that set her up for the eventual bond to Testament. I think none of these things have been processed for Shallan.
Yeah. Shallan's father starts to become more and more ambitious, as well as more and more violent. He starts social climbing, and his aggression towards his family and his staff escalates. Eventually, he discovers that Balat is planning to run away, and he reacts by killing Shallan's stepmother, and then he maims his son Balat. And that's kind of the final straw for Shallan. She poisons her father, and then realizing that that poison is not strong enough to actually kill him, it has only paralyzed him, she finishes the job by strangling her father to death. And she's about 16 years old at this point.
Yes, for the timeline aficionados, this date is very much marked on the absolutely wonderful Joff Wu produced Excel sheet that serves as the basis of the interactive timeline. 1,000,001 shout outs, but this is in 1172, 10th month, 8th week, first day. Shallan is 16 and 6 months. We now have kind of the last major time jump for Shallan. And then from this time until the first of the final 10 days, everything is going so fast. It is ridiculous when we put all of the events that are about to happen and give them a timeline, because it is often major traumatic event separated from major traumatic event by days, weeks. Like, these characters, none of them, Shallan included, are getting much of a rest at all.
They're going through it. And these timeline episodes have really highlighted that for me and really helped me kind of put myself in the mindset or the shoes of these characters and exactly what they've been dealing with. So after Shallan's father's death, she and her brothers discover the extent of the difficulty that their house is in, the debts and the people that her father has made promises to. And so they concoct this plan to send Shallan to become Jasnah's ward so that she can steal Jasnah's soulcaster. They think that replacing their broken soulcaster will help them basically pay all of their debts, and they can return the soulcaster to the people that their father got it from, who, of course, later we find out is the Ghost Bloods.
Functionally, this is the beginning of Way of Kings.
Yes.
We see Shallan traveling to Kharbranth, where she will eventually kind of catch up to Jasnah and is able to convince Jasnah to accept her as her ward, the first ward of Jasnah in a long time. The date here is 1173, 6 month, 10th week. Shallan is 17 and 2 months old. We, of course, are then going to follow Shallan chronologically through the books and through the events of the books, beginning in this moment. And it is now about putting many of these events in line with other events and allowing everything to kind of play out towards the conclusion, or at least meeting us in the timeline to where we are before Stormlight Archive 5.
So Shallan starts studying under Yasna's tutelage, and they're researching Gavilar's death. At this time, she also befriends an ardent named Kabsal, who is frequently visiting Yasna, ostensibly to try to convert her to believe in the Almighty. We'll get to the actual reason in a moment.
Yeah, it is during this time that they have the very important discussion about cymatics, which we have discussed in detail before, but I believe that there's going to be a big Chekhov's gun situation with cymatics mentioned in book 1, and maybe we'll have some important plot points in book 5, or at least the back half. But I think we're going to see something big with cymatics, or some understanding of how cymatics plays into, and it begins with this conversation between Shallan and Kabsal.
This is also the time where Shallan and Yasna go out for some kind of practical learning, and Yasna kills 3 criminals via soul casting. Shallan is really upset by this event, and it helps her kind of overcome her moral quandary about stealing Yasna's soulcaster. And she goes through with her plan. She switches out Yasna's soulcaster for the Davar family's broken soulcaster. However, before she can make her escape with that stolen soulcaster, she is set upon by cryptics, and she accidentally soul casts, entering Shadesmar for the first time, or at least like glimpsing Shadesmar for the first time. And in order to hide the fact that she has soul cast, she pretends that it was a suicide attempt, and she is confined to the infirmary.
This is all within 2 months of joining Yasna's wardship, until the time that she is in the infirmary, and has kind of marked her transition once again with the cryptics, and kind of demonstrated her truths, though it's difficult to really lock down when Shallan is saying her ideals. We do think that this event was a reacceptance, maybe, of truths that she had said previously.
Yeah, we talk a little bit more about this timeline in that previous episode, but there's a possibility that at this point her statement of "I am terrified" is being counted as a truth, and see that previous episode for more details and discussion.
It's in the infirmary that Kabsal arrives back with the jam, the customary bread and jam, the bread being poisoned, the jam being the antidote. And Yasna begins to suspect the food is poisoned, partly because she is just kind of neurotic in that way, and she's always suspecting bad things from happening. But it is as Yasna tries to soul cast the food to avoid eating it and to avoid ingesting the poison that the rub is up, that Kabsal's crimes are revealed, and that Shallan finally realizes the repercussions of perhaps her childish fantasies that may have resulted in Kabsal wooing her, or this kind of very cliche story that was running in the background. I think she always knew that it wasn't real, but it was something she was allowing herself to entertain at this time.
So Yasna soul casts the food, which gets rid of both the poison but also the antidote, and Kabsal and Shallan have already eaten the poisoned items. Now there is no antidote. Kabsal ends up dying, and the only way to save Shallan is by Yasna soul casting her blood. In this process, Shallan reveals that she has stolen the soul caster, and we find out that Kabsal is a secret assassin from the Ghost Bloods.
I believe it would have been not something that we knew at the time, but is later revealed in Oathbringer that there are no known fabrials that soulcast blood. I think the stone they need is garnet, and they don't have any soulcasters that use blood. If we had known that, it would have been an indication that Yasna soulcasting blood could not have been done unless she herself was the full soulcaster, because no fabrial could have done that process. These are just fun things that Brandon was dropping in the background, but I don't think there would have been a way for anybody to call that out at the time.
Yeah. Shallan confesses that her true purpose was to steal the Soulcaster and kind of gives Yasna some background on her family. She also confesses the abilities and her experiences with the cryptics. And so Yasna now really takes her on as a ward, as a fellow Knight Radiant, budding Knight Radiant. In this moment, in order to prove her Knight Radiant abilities to Yasna, Shallan enters Shadesmar again, and she offers "I am a murderer" as a truth. Again, questions about, is this an ideal? What number ideal would it be?
Yeah, is there some type of cheat code that Shallan gets because she's swearing an ideal that she's already sworn before? None of this is known. None of these things are currently explained, but they are happening.
Yasna also makes plans to marry Shallan into her family, specifically to Adolin, so that the Kholin family can have more Knights Radiant and therefore more power concentrated in their family. This is also a way to protect Shallan's family from their debts, and so Yasna is trying to help Shallan with the difficulties that she has found herself in. And so these two Knights Radiant make their way to the Shattered Plains looking for Urithiru. However, unfortunately, while they are in transit, their ship is attacked and Yasna is murdered. Shallan soulcasts the ship in an attempt to save the rest of the crew, and she washes up on shore after being saved by a Santhid.
Of course, this transition marks the difference between Way of Kings. Now we're into Words of Radiance with the saving of the Santhid, washing up on shore. Shallan, 17 and 5 months. Again, this is now only 3 months since she joined Yasna as a ward, and she is now trying to survive, make her way to the Shattered Plains. She is going to get teamed up with the group of merchants at first.
Well, yeah, if you put merchants in quotes, she's with the merchants first. They're slavers. She actually ends up with Kaladin's slave master that we first meet him with, Tvlakov, and she basically orders them to take her to the Shattered Plains, kind of posing as this, really highborn, powerful, light-eyed woman.
Act as if you have power and power will bestowed upon you.
Yeah, basically. And during her journey, she learns more about her light weaving abilities and she gets to know her Spren pattern a little bit better. Then they encounter this other caravan and she meets and befriends Tin, who starts to teach her about espionage and running cons, and she eventually ends up killing Tin because she discovers that Tin was responsible for the hit on Yasna. So Tin is in contact with, maybe a part of, the Ghost Bloods.
And it is at this time that she's revealed to be a shard bearer, which then kind of defaults her into master of this group of deserters, which includes Vatha and Gaz, who had by this point retreated from running Bridge 4 and the other bridge crews.
She successfully arrives in the Shattered Plains. She made it. And she pretty much immediately starts to ally herself with Sabariel, and she starts dating Adolin.
Gotta have time for the love life, especially in what will become many people's favorite relationship in the Cosmere, but certainly one of the greats.
Yeah. It's during this time that she also tries to learn some more information about the Ghost Bloods, and in order to do this, she invents her Veil persona. During an assignment from the Ghost Bloods, she sneaks into Amaram's secret room. She discovers his maps and notes about the Parshendi and the Voidbringers, and as she's sort of studying all of these things and trying to figure things out, Pattern is trying to convince Shallan to remember her past and remember what she already knew about light weaving long ago.
Yes, because while we, the reader, and Shallan, the character, experience the creation of Veil happening in this moment or at this time, Pattern is trying to get her to acknowledge the truth that, at least from my understanding of Rhythm of War, Veil has been there the whole time. Veil is I think what Shallan says is the blankness upon her memory after her
Yeah.
mother's death.
Yeah.
That veil was the first veil Shallan used to kind of block out her memories by shifting them into Vale's persona.
Yeah, Vale says that she's been with Shallan, protecting Shallan for years. And she also kind of indicates that Vale is the part of Shallan's mind that is creating those memory holes in order to protect her.
Yes, exactly. So it's a mechanism that Vale is, quote unquote, in control over to protect the main Shallan.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that in more detail with the reintegration of Vale later. But that's what Pattern knows at this point, what Vale knows at all points, and I think what Radiant will eventually know when they enter the picture.
As Shallan is getting to know Adolin and they are going on dates and being adorable, Shallan convinces Adolin to bring her out onto the Shattered Plains in order to study chasm fiends. This is her kind of cover story so that she can get out there to look for Urithiru.
During the hunt for the chasm fiend, there is a surprise attack leading to Kaladin and Shallan falling into the chasms, being left by the main army, and then needing to make their way back over several days and through a high storm. We talk about this moment and all the conversations in a lot of detail in that episode 81, and have one of our first big debates about what is the blade that is given to Kaladin in this moment. Fun debates looking at all of the tidbits of information direct from the text. We know that this moment is going to be important for a couple of reasons. A, always put Kaladin's ego in check a little bit, but Shallan's use of her memory to map out the Shattered Plains while they are moving, she eventually figures out the pattern, the cymactic pattern that is going on the Shattered Plains. And
I guess we don't really know if it's cymatic, but it is symmetrical.
It's symmetrical,
Yeah.
100%. And then other things that might be going on are cymatic. But yes, it is symmetrical that allows her to appropriately map out the rest of the Shattered Plains, which will help the final battle that happens at the end of Words of Radiance.
Yes. And so they use that knowledge to go on the final expedition to the center of the Shattered Plains. Shallan is along for the ride to help them find the Oath Gate, which she does. She figures out that the Oath Gate is a giant fabrial and figures out how to make it work, bringing all of the armies to Urithiru and saving them from the cataclysm of the two storms colliding.
That date is definitely well known, and we'll always refer to it. That's 1173, 10th month, 10th week, 3rd day. Shallan, 17 and 6 months. Again, 4 months since she became a ward to Yasna.
Oh my gosh. It's been a really busy 4 months.
And it only gets more busy as we go forward. This is the end of Words of Radiance, and with the beginning of Oathbringer, Shallan's out position as one of the Knights Radiant is being subtly hidden. She is claiming the Else colors when she is first out instead of the Light Weavers.
But she is known publicly as a Knight Radiant.
Brightness Radiant is fully out at this point, leading to further conflict between Shallan and actually the emergence of another alter, another persona in Radiant, someone who can process these new events, this new information. And I'm going to be honest, with the speed that everything is going, I'm surprised other characters haven't mentally split off into multiple alters to process these events.
I think that is like a little bit of the point of her family. I think every character in her family at one point says, everyone is insane except for me.
Of course,
They
right.
all look around at their siblings and they're like, oh my God, you are all falling apart. I'm the only one that's keeping it it together
Mm-hmm.
because of my specific coping mechanism. Balat attacks the Kremlings. They all have their own way of dealing with it that they think is a reasonable way to deal with it. And this just happens to be Shallan's. But at this point, seemingly she must be, again, a third ideal Knight Radiant, because Pattern can appear as a sword and he can change shape. Pattern has started again to try to help Shallan make peace with her past, and she does eventually acknowledge the truth that she murdered her father, which kind of precipitates her creation of the persona of Radiant.
Exactly. And so we get these continual actions and counteractions within Shallan. She admits a truth and takes a step forward, but then a persona or an alter comes to the fore in a more outward appearance. First, it is Veil in Words of Radiance, and then it is Radiant in Oathbringer, each corresponding with a advancement for Shallan, but because it's not done in the traditional hierarchical fashion that we see with the Windrunners, are these advancements? Are they acknowledgments of truths that an artist must go, but doesn't necessarily correspond to becoming a better artist? These are the things the reader is left to question and left to deal with, as Shallan is seemingly always kind of taking one step forward, two steps back, or a step to the side and a step forward and a step back.
Yeah, I think it's hard to say if it's steps forward or back or like what direction it is.
She's dancing.
She's really
dancing.
Struggles with these truths. Once she acknowledges a truth as part of her Radiant bond, she is incapable of re-suppressing it, basically, which is really difficult for her. She doesn't really have the tools to manage that in a more healthy way. She also worries that she's not worthy of being a Knight Radiant, and she has been put in this kind of elevated role of public Radiant and is kind of the public face of the Knights Radiant at this point, because she's one of the only Radiants that are out publicly in the Uri Thiru kind of society. And then, of course, she's also engaged to Adolin, who is third in line to the throne, this Alethi prince. And so she's experiencing a lot of insecurity on top of the PTSD that she's kind of re-encountering anew. And there's a lot going on. Plus, the Ghostbloods have discovered who Shallan really is. And they're like,
her brothers in kind of like transit.
Yeah, they're like, oh, we have your family, and Veil can still like join us, and we won't tell anyone your secret, basically.
She's using the Veil personas and the Radiant personas at a more frequent pace. She's kind of beginning the training, or at least the acknowledgement of using Vatha, Gaz, and what will eventually become the Unseen Court, but her squires in training. She begins to really kind of incorporate and understand, but she's primarily doing that as Veil. So we see these other alters take more and more responsibility, while Shallan is retreating back into her own hidden memory boxes and memory holes.
During this time, she discovers and faces the Midnight Mother, causing the Midnight Mother to retreat from the tower. And then she kind of goes on a unmade spree.
Yes. I mean, she becomes perhaps the most entwined with the Unmade,
yeah,
which is fitting because there were rumors. I think it's really just like one line that Wit eventually says that maybe some of the negative things that happened to Shallan's family were caused by an Unmade. So it is fitting that she does go on this Unmade focused path that we know is also going to continue in Stormlight Archive 5. But it begins with the Midnight Mother, and then she will force her way onto the expedition to Kholinar with Elhokar, Adolin, and Kaladin, where she's going to face two more Unmade. We see the Heart of the Revel and Arshirtman present in Kholinar.
Yeah, while they're in Kholinar, Shallan is investigating the Cult of Moments, and she also takes it upon herself to start to distribute food to the city's poor. Mm-hmm. She is really struggling with feeling like she is not really able to contribute a lot. And one way that she counteracts that is by doing something really tangible, giving food to the city's poor. She feels like she can really do a lot of good by doing that. And she continues to really struggle with her personalities. At this point, her dual identity as Vale and Shallan is revealed to her squires. And one of them, Ishna, remarks that she thought that Vale was the real person and Shallan was the persona. And Shallan, I thought this was really interesting. Shallan says that they are both equally false. And I think that this is textual evidence for a theory that we put forward in that previous timeline episode about who exactly the real Shallan is. I won't fully get into it here, but I think that is a good quote for my argument.
Yeah, and we'll just drop the name of Sadball Shallan might be the real one. This back and forth in Kholinar and the then external pressure that Shallan is going to face when she is moving to infiltrate the palace. She interacts with the heart of the revel and the kind of spren and human, not bonding so much as like the humans are pretending to be spren. Shallan is losing herself to her altars, which are definitely not spren, but they're also kind of spren-like. And then she has moments when she's deeply traumatized and she's like flashing through all of the different faces that she's ever drawn or worn. And the people around her start calling her a spren. They name her Swift Spren, this like white, veil coated or veil looking creature that is building up a legend around themselves as she's passing out food, as she's like giving back. But then this undercurrent of evil that follows the Swift Spren as well is it what's going to eventually push Shallan to a breaking point.
Right, because as Vale, Shallan is kind of acting as a person who grew up on the streets and has a lot of street smarts. But the reality is that Shallan doesn't know anything about what it's like to be a street urchin. And she hasn't known this whole time that even though she had really good intentions in giving out this food, it's actually contributed negatively to gang activities in the area that eventually leads to the death of her informant, Grund, I believe is his name.
Yeah, little kid Grund.
Yeah, and at this point, Shallan completely breaks down. She's absolutely overwhelmed with grief and shame, and she sort of convinces herself that she only hurts everyone around her, that she can't help. This moment kind of reminded me of Elokar saying, despite his best intentions, despite how hard he's trying, he seems to always fail. It's kind of a similar sentiment that Shallan is experiencing in this moment. Fellow Lightweavers.
Very cute. And it comes with some of, I think, the most poignant moments in Shallan's story so far, especially when Wit tells the story of the girl who looked up, and we get lines from Wit where we hear that failure is the point, that you have to keep failing and keep trying.
Lived.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Failures are the mark of a life well lived.
This is also when he tells her, accept the pain, but don't accept that you deserved it, which is another really big quote.
Yeah, top tier, just tattoo it to my soul.
So many people have tattooed it. I've seen a lot. He encourages her to sort of accept herself and to get control over her personas. And basically immediately after that, she has spent all night crying, basically, and talking to Wit. She shows back up at their little hideout and they're like, all right, we're going to attack the palace. So I don't think she gets any sleep. She immediately goes from this breakdown into this really intense attack situation.
But she does do it while looking stylish. And I want to at least call that out because it is the moment when she blends Shallan and her natural red hair with the veil outfit, the white hat and cloak or jacket. And Adolin calls it out as very stylish. But what he's actually remarking on is the first integration, a soft integration of Shallan and Vale, merging a little bit of that alter persona with her Shallan persona, Real Shallan? She gets a little bit better and unfortunately is then immediately thrown back into the fire. It is the same fire that is going to really put Kaladin in a very similar situation that we talked about last time. The battle fatigue and trauma that he faces is reminiscent, if not identical, to what Shallan is dealing with here. An inability to help everyone, a constant failure when you try to do something, and a hopelessness that you could never be better or never kind of progress.
But Wit's encouragement has really helped her. She takes that advice with her as she goes to face the heart of the revel, and it actually does help her to resist the pull of the heart of the revel. The heart eventually flees and kind of frees up the Kholinar Oathgate. She then interacts with Ja'anat again, and they use the Oathgate to help their little group escape some oncoming enemies. However, because the Oathgate has been corrupted, they end up in Shadesmar rather than back in Urithiru. On the bright side, they're not dead, which is what Ja'anat says she's going to try not to do. So, success.
That transition moment is marked on the timeline where 1174, second month, third week. Shallan is 17 and 7 months. This transition to Shadesmar marks an interesting time for the gang. It's our first look into Shadesmar. So basically everything that happens is interesting and of note to us because we've never experienced anything like this as a reader.
I mean, I think there is a lot of actual character growth during this time, both in her skills and in her relationships. Because as they're in Shadesmar, one, she learns how to read the impressions of the Shadesmar beads and how to like manifest those objects in Shadesmar, which is a cool skill. It I think marks an advancement in her abilities. And then as she is struggling, she has a few different conversations with Adolin, and we get to see their relationship grow a little bit. At some point, she confesses the truth about all of her personas to Adolin, and he accepts her. Like, that's a huge moment to, you know, tell your significant other, hey, I have magical DID. Hope you still want to marry me. And he does. And then in turn, he confesses that he murdered Sadeas. And in turn, Shallan accepts and approves of that action, which kind of solidifies their relationship a little bit more. It adds, I think, some weight and like some meat to that relationship that up until now has been kind of surface level. They've just been dating and, you know, they're in this like arranged engagement situation. And this is a moment that I think their relationship kind of becomes real.
Yeah, a true connection is formed. And while that is great, I think if we are right and there is an underlying Shallan, the Sadbal Shallan, that has created another Shallan, and Adolin is saying that's the thing that I'm attracted to, that's the one that I'm interested in, only causes further breakdown eventually as we follow Shallan going forward. Because again, if we're correct in this assumption, Adolin has never met the real Shallan, and the real Shallan knows that. And so anytime someone says...
Well, she hasn't realized it yet, so...
Yes. Well, again,
she's
Shallan,
not actually dealing with that yet.
This becomes very difficult when you're trying to only do this with words spoken. But yes, Shallan, the character that we know, hasn't acknowledged that fact. We don't even know if it's an accurate fact.
Yeah.
However, if it is, then this nice moment only becomes more of a negative moment when viewed from the persona of real Shallan.
Maybe. We don't know that. We'll see. Yeah. So many questions when Shallan and her identity is concerned. So they travel through Shadesmar, and during this kind of final battle that they go through to access the Oathgate to Thaylen City, Shallan creates illusions to distract the fused, but she fails to convince the Oathgate Spren to operate and to take them to Thaylen City. She then manifests the physical form of a wall inside Shadesmar. So like not the cognitive form, but the actual physical wall pops into Shadesmar in order to protect them.
We know how important this is because we see on their travels when the Honor Spren are so in awe of the appearance of Windspren around Kaladin on their side, because the Windspren are a physical thing that Nodum has never seen in the cognitive realm. And so what Shallan is doing is basically that. She's bringing something physical into the cognitive realm. Theoretically, no Spren would have seen anything like that ever happen.
Yeah. Then, of course, they're immediately deposited into the Battle of Thalen Field, and Shallan creates light weavings of every person that she's ever sketched in her entire life in order to create an army to distract the enemy, including creating realistic deaths for her creation. And this act is not only exhausting, but she remarks that she feels like part of her is dying every time one of her creations dies, which I'm not really sure exactly what that means. I think it just indicates that there's possibly some capital C connection happening when we're talking about these light weaving abilities, especially as her skills start to increase. And like we see here, her light weavings are able to have substance and physicality to them.
Yeah, a whole bunch of stuff is happening during this scene that we've speculated a lot about previously. But I do think that adding of physical weight, some tangibility to her illusions is a marked advancement in her abilities. And I think what you said about capital C connection is also likely true. The more physical weight, it's like the inverse kind of what she just did in Shadesmar. She brought something physical, the wall, into Shadesmar. Now she is bringing something cognitive, her sketches, her illusions,
her thoughts, her memories,
but then is adding physicality into them. So I truly think that Shallan's power growth and the demonstration of her powers is the best done, maybe in all of Stormlight Archive. She has the traumatic version of this heroic version in Kholinar, when she is spamming faces onto herself and she freaks out everybody around. She's basically unconsciously or not with control, traumatically going through all of the different sketches that she's done, the illusions she's done. And now, in the heroic moment, she's having that same experience, going through everything she's ever done, but she's doing it purposefully and wielding them and connecting to them in a greater way. Maybe the connection to them and the separation from her is the important advancement, instead of letting them all wash over her and kind of like live on her face. Exactly. It gets them out of her. And then, yes, that is a loss. It's not a gain. She's giving up something that then quote unquote dies when the illusion is killed, but it's a better and healthier method for her.
I like that.
These
I like
are
that
all
thought.
the speculations that I do between podcast days that I don't get to talk on mic.
One other action that she takes during this battle is that she light weaves a rock to look like a ruby for Lift to use as a decoy. And then Yasna finds Shallan, sees that she is absolutely exhausted, and Yasna helps her retreat from the battlefield. This is the moment that we've talked about quite a bit, where there's the possibility that we're maybe seeing Shallan's shard plate,
which would mark her as a fourth ideal radiant.
Right.
We haven't seen this again. I was actually surprised with how much we speculated after Oathbringer that we didn't get any type of shard plate confirmation in Rhythm of War, but that's not something that we have seen again. I'm wondering if Kaladin and his wearing of the fourth ideal proudly will perhaps encourage others to get there as well.
Well, I think we know that the Knights Radiant orders function differently, and there's just not as much cause for Shallan to wear hers because she is a spy. She's not a warrior, you know? So I don't think it's weird that we haven't seen her wearing her shard plate again.
I think that maybe the acknowledgement of what it takes to wear the shard plate for Kaladin is so obvious that he can't not be the thing who's like walking around in shard plate, because as you're saying, his role as a soldier requires it.
Right.
But in the same way, there is something important about creating the shard plate bonding with the lesser spren. And to me, it's weird that we haven't seen that again because
I mean, to be fair,
it's important.
she's also in Shadesmar for basically all of Rhythm of War.
And when Kaladin...
Can you even wear Shardblade in Shadesmar?
What Kaladin does in Oathbringer is he starts thinking about the fourth ideal, and that's when he summons Windspren into the cognitive realm.
Yeah.
I would suspect that Shallan is also able to do something similar. She could, theoretically, summon the lesser spren for her shard plate into the cognitive realm. Not that it would go around her like shard plate, but she should be able to do the exact same thing as a Radiant.
It just would make her more obvious. And like her whole thing as a spy is trying to not be ostentatious.
There is a spy, but there's also
so like
the Radiant.
Why is she going to be like, hello, look at me. I'm sneaking around.
Well, we don't know how Radiant Shardplate reacts or if it is different or similar. Maybe a Radiant Shardplate is a perfect illusion thing that you just put on and it becomes illusions more easily.
Veil's actually been her Shardplate the whole time.
I am curious if anything like that will be seen, if we will see only the Shardplates emerge as armor or if they are kind of like Fabrials and that they could change shape and be something different based on what the Radiant wants and needs.
Yeah. We wrap up Oathbringer with a few scenes between Shallan and Adolin. Shallan is still kind of conflicted between her personalities. Not all of her personas feel the same way about Adolin. She tells Adolin this, and he offers to dissolve their relationship so that she can potentially pursue a relationship with Kaladin. But Shallan's like, no, I don't want to do that. I want to commit to you. And so Shallan and Adolin are married. This is in the year 1174, month 2, week 10, day 5. And we're about to go to their wedding reception.
We are, yes. The World Hopper Ball at Dragonsteel Nexus will be the reception of Shallan and Adolin. Shallan is 17 and 8 months. She has gone a period of 6 months since first becoming Yasna's ward.
Oh my goodness. Oh my God.
Let's go on to Rhythm of War. We do have a little bit of a time jump. We have about a year that passes in between these two. By this point, Shallan is known as the Master Lightweaver. She's publicly training, recruiting squires, and they are at this point known as the Unseen Court.
And as far as the Ghost Bloods and Shallan's relationship with the Ghost Bloods, Mraize has brought her brothers to Urithiru, and the Ghost Bloods have thanked her for defeating the Midnight Mother, and then they tell her that they want her to convince Ja'anat to work for them. During this year in between these two books, Shallan, in cahoots with the Ghost Bloods, has also infiltrated the Sons of Honor, which is now being led by Aile Sadius. Aile is assassinated by poison, and Shallan becomes convinced that there is a Ghost Bloods spy in her inner circle. She absolutely refuses to think that perhaps one of her personas did the poisoning without her knowing about it.
Flashing forward here, we know that it is Radiant who does the poisoning, and now flashing back, because the poisoning, Shallan's refusal to believe that she herself is at fault, begins her time as Rashar's greatest detective.
Yeah, she does spend a lot of this book detectiving, and she is extremely shaken and disturbed to think that there may be a spy so close to her and that maybe she can't trust the people in her inner circle. Meanwhile, she thinks that she has found a good balance between her three personas, but Shallan, Veil, and Radiant are all disagreeing about how to handle this spy situation. And this kind of kicks off this pattern that continues to happen of the personas forcibly taking control and forcibly subduing the other personas. So clearly it's not a balanced, happy situation.
Definitely not. And it begins to unravel Shallan to the greatest extent that we have seen. She's had low
Yes.
moments, she's had difficult moments, but this fight between herself and the necessary acknowledgement of what has happened, the refusal to see what is going on, this continues throughout most of Rhythm of War, but especially as Shallan and Adolin are venturing into Shadesmar as they try to seek out the Honor Spren's assistant to bond more people to help them in their fight. This task is supported by the Ghostbloods because they send her with a secret mission of assassinating Risteris, who is also the Herald Collect.
Because he is the leader of the Sons of Honor.
Excellent. So we have, yes, the former Herald who is also going mad, who is the leader of the Sons of Honor, which is the counter secret organization to the Ghostbloods.
Right. Originally, her job is just to find him, and this is going to be her final test to truly become a member of the Ghostbloods. The Ghostbloods also reveal to her that they are trying to figure out how to take Stormlight off-world, and that they are searching for Ba-Edo Mishram.
These two revelations have sparked so much different speculating and led to some wild and crazy theories by yours truly, as well as what we now know, because we've got that blurb, that summary about Stormlight Archive 5, is going to be Shallan's main task, moving towards understanding of Ba-Edo Mishram, completing the quartet, the quintet of different unmaids that Shallan, by the end, is Shallan going to go through and deal with all the unmaids?
I think yes.
Probably. I mean, the thrill was dealt by Dalinar. I
guess that's true.
But Shallan was there. She was around. No, she does the fake honors drop for Lith, which sets up the real honors drop for Dalinar.
True.
So a key member of imprisoning the thrill is actually Shallan.
But Kaladin is the one who faces Yelignar as Amaram.
Okay, excellent point there. So
that's one unmade that Shallan is not in any way responsible for dispatching.
But this goal of the Ghostbloods moving Stormlight off planet, what we eventually figure out about Risteris, who is trying to get off-world, corresponding with what we learn from the Lost Metal, Kelsier, who is Thydakar, who is also trying to get off his world. They have led to many theories and speculations about the why. Check our back episodes. I'm sure you could just drop into any one and you'll find me talking about the weight that is required to get off-world when you are entangled and how these characters might disentangle themselves.
But for the moment, Shallan is in Shadesmar. There are a lot of kind of detailed plot points at this point in the story, but most of them just have to do with Shallan searching for Risteris, as well as continuing to try to figure out who the spy near her is as her personas get more and more out of control and kind of bickering and fighting amongst each other more and more.
However, while she is unraveling, the bond between Adolin is growing stronger and they are confiding in each other more about the secrets that she's dealing with and about the initial struggles, the goal of stealing from Yasna, the complicated feelings that Adolin is dealing with in regards to Dalinar. Remember, these are revelations that have now been cooking for about a year after the events of Oathbringer, but Adolin is for the first time being able to process an original trauma for him, the loss of his mother. But he built his story around those events, and how his father reacted, how his father treated him in Renarin, were all built around lies that he is now just being exposed to as lies. Shallan, master of lies, is, I think, able to bond and understand and recognize the depth of difficulty that Adolin is going through, and then seeing that in Adolin helps her confront what she needs to confront.
Maybe. Yeah.
I'm not saying it's good for her, but it does maybe get her to the point that she needs to get to.
I mean, I think it's always good when we're experiencing periods of low mental health to at least have that one person who can be there to reassure us that they love us, that they're going to be there no matter what. And that's what Adolin provides for Shallan during this. He can see that she is not having a good time, but he continues to show up to say, hey, I love you. I see you, kind of no matter what, I'm going to support you. I'm going to be here for you.
During this time, Shallan is 18 years and 9 months, and there's now very few days until we eventually get all caught up. But it is shortly thereafter that Shallan realizes the spy in her midst is Pattern, forcing this revelation. Pattern needs to confess to her that he is lying, and the news is absolutely distressing. It kind of is a straw that breaks the camel back, a pattern that breaks the Shallan back, and kind of down the house of cards begins to tumble as it's revelation after revelation.
Yeah,
for
Shallan basically completely retreats at this point, and Vale and Radiant are the only personas that are really interacting with the world because Shallan just feels so betrayed by Pattern. Conversations between Radiant and Vale and Pattern reveal that Pattern was not Shallan's first spren, and Pattern has been strategizing how to get Shallan to reface her old Deadeye spren Testament, and he has found Testament and has brought Testament here to try to kind of fix that hole in Shallan.
In the background, the High Judge has finally made an appearance at Lasting Integrity, and Shallan realizes the High Judge, Risteris, Kalek, the Herald, all the same
one person.
No differences at all. It's at this time that Shallan is also able to use the Sion Cube in order to communicate with Mraize.
And she's like, what the heck? You're telling me to kill a herald, bro? She refuses to kill Risteris, and she basically expresses doubt that Mraize has been telling her the truth about anything. Mraize tries to convince her to go through with it by telling her, hey, if you kill Risteris, then you could use your light weaving to pose as the High Judge and then rule in Adolin's favor. So really, this is a win-win.
It's not honorable, but man, that's a good plan. Like, you got to give it
It's
hats
such a
off
good plan.
to Mraize.
Yeah.
That's a very good plan. You solve, you kill a
It's
lot of
so
birds
tempting.
with that stone.
Yeah. Adolin's trial does go poorly, and it seems like he is going to go to Spren jail. And so Shallan decides to go through with it. She's going to kill Risteris. She's going to impersonate the judge. She's going to save Adolin. But Vale and Radiant gang up against her and say, no, we're not doing that, which is when Formless formally makes their appearance and tells Adolin, you might be surprised what the judge does tomorrow, because she's back on her assassinating kick.
This emergence of Formless undercuts everything that we've known. What we've said in this episode, we have never once mentioned Formless, and I think that that should be seen as intentional, because I don't think anything else has been Formless until this moment, unlike other personas or alters that may have appeared at different times and we just didn't understand what they were. I truly don't think that we have viewed Formless until this moment. I think this is a new alter at this time.
I don't think it's new inside of Shallan, but I do think it's the first time that we see Formless taking action in the world.
That's fair. I mean,
Yeah.
we don't know how many alters are within Shallan, but we certainly do mark their appearance outwardly. And this appearance of Formless is going to drive her to going to kill Risteris. Radiant is panicking, trying to make her reconsider. She admits to killing Iolale, and Pattern and the other personas are trying to talk sense into Formless, but it's
all for naught.
Yeah, it's all becoming clear that Formless seemingly has more will than the other alters, or is at least not able to be rejected, overtaken in the same way.
Finally, Vale appears as a light weaving outside of Shallan, and Shallan and Vale speak truths to each other about who they are, basically, and then Shallan ends up absorbing Vale's memories and reintegrating that persona into herself. So Vale will not be making her appearance as Vale anymore. Now Vale is just part of Shallan. During this, she also faces the truth that her first spren was Testament, and Shallan made that spren a Deadeye when she was so distraught by killing her mother that she broke her radiant bond.
So we're moving towards the end of Rhythm of War for Shallan's story.
Yeah, that's her big climax.
Yeah, she is approaching her 19th birthday. As I said, that's going to be the first day of Stormlight Archive 5. And we have kind of a cute, adorable family of Shallan,
very weird.
Pattern, Testament, Adolin, Maya, and a broken group of Radiance and Partial Radiance. And
they're trying to figure out their new dynamics with all of the revelations that have occurred. They're trying to help their Deadeyes, Maya and Testament, and kind of renegotiating all of these relationships. All of this also leads Shallan to officially break up with the Ghostbloods. She tells Mraize that the Ghostbloods better get out of Urithiru and be out by the time she gets back. Mraize then threatens her family and is like, plus, if you stay with us, I'll give you lots of knowledge. So he's got like the carrot and the stick of like, one, I'm going to hurt your family. Two, I could do so much for you. But Shallan's like, no, I've heard this song and dance man, and I'm not into it. She goes as far as to challenge the Ghostbloods and vows to get to Bat Mishram before the Ghostbloods can, which is where we're going to pick up with her in Wind and Truth.
So take a deep breath in, let it all out, because you have just been Matrix downloaded with the chronological timeline of Shallan Davar. And man, is it a whirlwind. It's a whirlwind for all these characters. It's certainly a whirlwind for the mini personas of Shallan Davar, because she's not having one story. She's having multiple stories within stories, crisscrossing and interacting all at the same time. I'm incredibly excited for where Shallan goes. We have speculated so much about the future possibility of Shallan. I know you want her to become like a 17th shard world hopper out there, just joining up with Chris, one with white hat and blue and purple, the other with white hat and red hair, and just out there rocking it. But I think that, as I mentioned earlier, Shallan's growth, her power set, the way that her story is almost like the perfect blend of action in the present, information revealed in the past, and then how that information impacts everything. There is so much still to learn, so much that we need to have kind of proven or
there's
confirming.
A lot to still wrap up with her story, for sure.
And so it feels open, where kind of a lot of what we felt about Kaladin is his story could end. It could end in a lot of different ways. We're speculating about how it ends. But I do think that people, and ourselves included, are imagining an ending for Kaladin of sorts. I'm not imagining an ending for Shallan. I'm imagining her opening up to greater possibilities.
Her future certainly seems more open-ended, where it kind of could go anywhere, and we'll see what happens in book 5, obviously, but I don't feel like her story could be wrapped up in just one more book.
I agree. I think that there's a lot more for us to see with Shallan, and as we do these setup episodes for Wind and Truth, as we've done these chronological episodes, I just kind of see Kaladin's story is now in micro and Shallan's story is in macro. What I mean by that is we kind of picked up with Kaladin and then followed him chronologically going forward, getting a few moments of his backstory to flush out the character. And now, after 5 books, we are going to be in the same situation with Shallan. We are going to have her backstory, have her character, and now we can start the chronological story going forward of Shallan.
For sure.
That's how I feel. Let us know if it's how you feel as well. Let's do this as a final question for the audience. Let us know how you see Shallan's story ending, at Stormlight Archive 5. But really what I want to know is your speculation for Shallan post Stormlight Archive 5. If you truly believe like she's going to die or something is going to happen so her story ends, you can let me know that. But more, I want to hear the speculation about where Shallan is going to go after Stormlight Archive 5.
There's so much speculation that's possible with Shallan because her character and her plot arc are so complex. So I would also love to hear from people. If you listen to our other 2 Shallan episodes, tell us what you think about when Pattern and Testament are showing up, when Shallan is certain ideal levels. Do we see her shard plate or not? What do you think?
Thank you all so much for staying with us. If you join the Patreon right now until November 1st, and then remain a patron for the month of November, that's the secret. Be a patron for the month of November. You will be entered into a raffle that we mentioned last time for a hardcover edition of the art book from Shandel Green. A lot of her art is available on Instagram, but if you have any interest, join on Patreon now. Stay a patron for the month of November.
We're going to do a little raffle at the end of that month, and you could win a beautiful art book with all kinds of Cosmere art. Until next time, life before death,
Strength before weakness.
journey before destination.